This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup week of August 31st, 2015. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like when you're watching this video, just check out the description of this video where I will place links to each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is Murmers Typeface. This download includes both a font in OpenType font format as well as a bonus pack of items in Illustrator format. So I have them opened up inside Illustrator here to show it, and here is the font, and right here are the bonus elements. So I'll go over the bonus elements very quickly right here. There's a small selection of different items up the top here, so knives, a hatchet, a Swiss Army knife, and then a gun. There are some handprints right here, as well as a few different really stark vector items like a lamp, and then a light, and then we have a brick wall, a fence, as well as a window. So these are the bonus items that are included, and there's a couple different hand-drawn looking starbursts off to the side here that you can go ahead and use as you see fit. But the big thing here is the font, so that's what's opened right here. And typing in lowercase as well as uppercase, both of them will appear to be uppercase, but the lowercase version of them will be a little bit smaller, and then the uppercase version of them is a little bit larger, and then it has some kind of accent swoosh marks off to the sides on a lot of the different letters here to make them stand out a little bit more. And I'll just zoom in really quick on the lowercase letters so you can get a good idea of how these look. They're very vintage inspired in their appearance, and I actually really like how this font looks. I think it flows together very nicely, and all the letters seem to work very nicely between the uppercase as well as the lowercase versions. And little touches like how the leg on this K kind of swoops around here and hugs the L or whatever letter would be in front of it make this font work really nicely when you type out sentences. And I'll just keep on going through the letters on the bottom right here very quickly so you can see all of those. And here are the uppercase ones, so keep note of all these accented kind of swooshing parts of the letters that add a little bit more of a difference between the lowercase as well as the uppercase. Like if you look at the D right here, there's this little accent mark near the bottom of the uppercase version of the D that kind of sets it apart a little bit more than the lowercase one. So it's nice to see that they didn't make the uppercase variants just larger. They instead made them totally custom and unique, which is a really nice touch when you actually go in here and type out different words. So they also included all the numbers 0 through 9 and then a bunch of different special characters as well shown below. And if I highlight over this and go to type and then glyphs, you can see all the different special characters that are included here. So there is a pretty nice selection of different special characters to go in and use, so you can kind of check out the glyphs on your own if you want to see everything that's inside here. And below that I typed up free goods roundup so you can see how it looks typed up into a sentence. I think the stock kerning looks very good. There will likely be areas that you'll want to go in there and kind of clean up and make sure they look perfect, but that's pretty typical for most fonts that you run into. And the stock spacing between words themselves also looks very nice. I wouldn't really go in there and change that all that much. And also looking at these different words typed up, you can see how the uppercase letters work in conjunction with the lowercase letters. I think they mesh very well and make this font work just that little bit better. But that's it for the font, and do remember there are these bonus items as well if you want to go in here and use those. So if you liked what you saw so far and you think you'll have use for this font, just be sure to download it this week. Next up is Cardboard Texture Pack. This pack includes 8 unique cardboard textures in both black and then white, and they include them in JPEG format shown right here, as well as EPS format. So if you want to use these as vector, you can go ahead and do that as well. If I go to image and image size for the JPEGs, they're 2200 by 2200 pixels. So they're plenty big for pretty much anything on the web, and a good selection of different print ones as well. If you're working on really huge files for print, I'd suggest going in and using the EPS files instead of the JPEG, just to get that little bit more resolution. So here are the actual textures, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer here. So this is at 100%, so you can get a good idea of how these were created. So I'd assume they were scanning in different cardboard pieces and then using levels or curves or something like that to really accent the dark parts and then totally remove a lot of the midtones. If I zoom in very close here, you can tell it's pretty much just black and white. There are some grays, but overall these are pretty darn stark in appearance. So this is the second one right here, and there is a nice variance of different textures here to pick from and use. So they should be pretty applicable depending if you want something a little bit more thin like this one, a little bit less coverage, as well as something a little bit heavier like this one right here. And this is the second one in black, just so you can see the difference between the white version and the black version. If I select the white version and hit Control-I on a PC or Command-I on a Mac to invert it, and then toggle between these two, you can tell they're exactly the same. So if you ever want to use a white one and just check it out in black, you could either use the black file or just invert it very quickly, and you'll end up getting that black file just like that. So here's the third one, a little bit bigger pieces of texture right here, as well as a pretty good coverage of texture overall across the entire thing. So here's the fourth one, which has a little bit lighter coverage on the left side, and then it gets a little bit heavier off to the right side if you want to create a texture fade or something like that. And you could of course overlay multiple textures to create a really strong fade if that's the look you're going for. So here's the fifth one. I'll just zoom in a little bit closer here. Whoops, a little bit too much. So you can get a good idea of how this one looks. This is at 100% once again. So here's cardboard texture number 6, which has a little bit lighter coverage than some of the other ones, but some really darker black spots on them to add a little bit of different variance to this particular texture. And here's the seventh one with a very light coverage on the left side, and it gets a little bit darker as you continue going right. And here's the 8th texture that has kind of like a folded or a crease texture running right down on a diagonal right here, as well as a few different darker patches running up the vertical line right here and here. So overall, a nice pack of 8 different textures in both JPEG as well as EPS, and then there's a light and dark versions. So if you think you'll have use for these textures in a project either now or in the future, just be sure to grab this pack this week. Next up is Resume/CV Brice. These resumes come in a ton of different formats, including InDesign, Microsoft Word, PDF, and then Photoshop. So I have the Photoshop ones opened up right now, and it includes both a cover letter shown right here, as well as a resume. And on this cover letter, I left these guides on just so you can see that these do include full bleed. So the actual size of this is the portion that's meant to be printed, and then the rest of it on the tops, bottoms, and sides is the bleed. And if I didn't mention it before, they include these in both letter format as well as A4 format, so you can kind of pick which one you think will work best for whatever kind of paper you're printing them on. Now I'm just going to quickly go to View and then Extras and turn off these guides so you can kind of see this on its own. So in the Photoshop file, at least, all these are very nicely organized into folders to the side. So if I toggle on and off the header, you can tell it toggles that portion of this Photoshop file on and off. Same thing goes for the contact or all the other sections. So it's very quick to go in here and kind of figure out where everything is, rather than just having a ton of different type files scattered about. That would take you a little bit longer to find where everything is organized in the layers here, so it's nice that that is done so cleanly. And I should also note here that they do include 90 different social icons in Illustrator and EPS format, so that's a pretty huge plus. If you just want the social icons, you could certainly download this as well and just use those social icons on their own. So all these are in here for you to use. Pretty much anything I can think of I see. But back to the cover letter here, it's a nice 2-column layout with the header up at the top here. So on this side, you just have your basic contact information, and then on the right side here, you have the actual portion where you'll type up the cover letter. And this type is fully live and customizable. I didn't download these fonts, but you'll want to do that before you go ahead and make changes here. But once you do that, you can go ahead and customize this. And you could, of course, change the font too if you don't like the one used. It should be very easy to go in there and do that. So that's it for the cover letter. Very straightforward, nice and clean, and gets to the point pretty quick. So here's the resume, a very strong 2-column layout right here with the header up the top. Once again, all the layers are very cleanly organized, so they should be very quick to go in there and figure out what you're doing or where you're making all those changes. So right here on the left side, we have a spot where you can enter in your name, job title, and location, as well as a little spot to describe what you're looking to do for that company. And then a nice big experience section with education below that, which is also how I would lay this out. On the right side here, we have contact information as well as social links. And that's where the social links that are provided in Illustrator and EPS will come in really handy if you want to customize this a bit more. We have expertise, where you can enter in all your skills and kind of move these little bar graphs to the left or right to demonstrate how good you are with those different items. And a word section, and if you don't have any, you can just toggle this layer off and then take the references layer right here and move that up if that's something you want to do. And then you just have to find where this little line is and make sure you remove that as well. So the references, I don't tend to show references on my resume unless specifically asked, but it does have it here if you want to go ahead and do that up front, or you can just toggle the visibility of this little folder right there and hide it. If you want to do it that way, it's pretty easy to do. But that's it for these files. Do remember they also include Word, PDF, and InDesign if you want to use one of those instead. If you're doing this for professional printing, I might suggest using InDesign, just because InDesign is a really nice way of laying out stuff like this. But if you're dealing with a more traditional company, sometimes they really want the things in Word format, since a lot of businesses use Word over everything else. So it's nice that that is also an option. So if you think you'll find this resume and cover letter template useful, just be sure to pick it up this week. Next up is Italy Photopack. This is a pack of 34 different images of Italy in JPEG format, and I picked 5 out at random here to show, but there are 34 in total, so be sure to pick up the entire pack if you like what you see right here. And if I go to image and then image size, just to check out the size of these, it's 3000 by 2000 pixels. So these are fairly large photos, and they'll be plenty big for pretty much anything you want to throw at them on the web. And as you can see in this particular photo, a lot of these have a very vintage or faded look to them overall. And there's a nice selection of different images too, from a mountainous landscape like this. There's also city images and nature images that you can kind of check out and use as you see fit. So here's the next one, which is on a curving road right here. That's a nice mix of foresty landscape as well as a building off to the side here. So here's the next one, and as you can see, it's kind of a trend here to have little cityscapes with a lot of nice nature features in the background to kind of make these a little bit more interesting. And here is the next image, which is an overview of this cityscape right here. A very classic looking Italian town with the mountains in the background. And here's the last of the 5, which is one of the very nature focused items in this pack. There are a small handful of different images just like this one that you might not be able to tell are taken in Italy, but they're still very nice images of nature that should be pretty usable on a lot of different blogs or different projects like that. So do remember there are 34 different images in total in this entire pack. It would have taken too long to go over absolutely everything, but this was just a small section of what you can kind of expect in terms of the image quality and the different types of images that you can come to expect. So if you liked what you saw so far and you want to get the entire pack of 34, just be sure to grab them this week while they're still free. Next we have brush, ChalkProBrush. So when you download this file, it includes an EPS and then another file that doesn't have a file type associated with it, so I wasn't quite sure what that was. But I opened up the EPS inside Illustrator, and then I went to Window and then Brushes, near the top here, and clicked that. And when I opened up Brushes, all the different brush types were already inside here, so that's just an easy way of going ahead and doing it. And all these brushes that are in this file by default are just kind of examples of what the brushes look like, but they're outlined, so you won't really want to use these unless you're using them as a texture or a divider line, something like that. You could go ahead and use those for that reason if you wanted to. But I'm just going to hit B on my keyboard to bring up the brush tool and draw a quick little squiggly line right here. And I'm going to select this line, and then I'm going to start applying these different chalkboard style brushes to them. So they're like chalk essentially, I guess might be a better word of saying it. But I'm just going to scroll down these different options so you can see how they apply to this line. There's a pretty nice and diverse selection of different line types here to pick from. They vary in both thickness of the line itself as well as the shape of the line and then the actual consistency of the line. So there are some really nice variations here to kind of pick from and use and play with if you're looking for a whole bunch of different styles. And sometimes using a lot of different brushes like this, if you're not sticking to just one particular style, will give the overall brush a much more natural look, like someone's actually been drawing with some different pieces of chalk or something similar. So if you go in here and use these, you might really want to consider layering some of these, like layering several different lines on top of each other, or using several different sorts of brushes on a singular illustration to make it look really handmade and not just like a single Illustrator brush that's been used over and over. Sometimes that'll break the effect that you're trying to create. But I just went through all the different brushes here, and you can of course go to Window and then Stroke if you want to. If I do that very quickly, this is Window and then Stroke kind of near the bottom. And once you have your stroked item selected here, you can change the weight of the stroke to make these bigger or smaller. So if you want to get a little bit more versatility from the looks of these, you can go ahead and do that as well. But a nice pack of different brushes here. And there's a very nice variance, like I said before, of different styles. So these should be pretty darn useful to go ahead and use on lots of different projects, or use on the same project and get a whole bunch of different variants in terms of your line weight, shape, and structure. That should really add a whole lot to making these look that little bit more natural. So if you like these brushes and you think you'll have use for them in the future, just be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. And last up here is 6 vintage logos. These logo templates are provided in EPS format, and I have them opened up inside Illustrator here to show them. And something to note quick before I start, there is a font included called Retro Sans, and for reference, all the fonts are free and there are links inside the actual download of the package that show you where to download them. But the link for Retro Sans didn't work, so I'm going to be putting that in the description of the video where you can kind of check that out and find where that actual link is. If for some reason I forget, just yell at me in the comments and I'll be sure to add that in. So by default here, there are 6 different logo templates that you can use and modify as you see fit. All the type is fully live and customizable, but also included in this, and I'll just go over these very quickly, are the individual logo elements that are hand-drawn. So there are some wheat, a tire, a coffee cup, some vintage style boxers, and then it looks like a slab of meat. Below that we have 4 hand-drawn starbursts, and I'll just zoom in a little bit closer on these so you can kind of see the line quality. There's some really cool texturing that's kind of hard to notice at first going on in these, just around the edges, so that's kind of a nice little touch on these starbursts as well. And below that we have 2 handmade textures. So if I highlight over this one right here, you can tell these are pretty complicated and they're both in vector format, which is really nice for textures because you can use them as big as you want. If I zoom in really close here, you can tell how they look up close. It looks like this was probably a live trace of some different, either a sponge pattern or a handmade stipple pattern. I'm not totally sure how, but I think overlaid on the vintage logos above, these will look pretty darn nice. And that's it for the bonuses that are included here. So I'm going to quickly go over the actual logo templates. So there are 6 in total, and I'll just zoom in from the top left here and kind of go to the side. So a lot of the font choices do use a nice and distressed font by default. The layouts themselves are also very clean if I just continue zooming over here. So you should be able to mix and match these different either icons or the different fonts and word choices as you see fit. Like if you want to move the word Seafood Cafe and change it for like this open 24-hour bit at the bottom of this one, you can just select these and then ungroup them both. And then you should be able to very quickly just move these different elements over so you can kind of customize these a little bit more. There's a huge texture running over these, by the way, too, so kind of keep note of that. And you can of course remove those textures if you don't want it there. And here's the next one, which has a coffee glass at the top. So if you're a coffee shop owner, this one might be super handy for you. And I'll just go down the bottom ones here. So a lot of these layouts should be very universal in terms of how you can actually use them. And once you swap out the different illustration or icons up at the top or wherever they fit, you can really start to modify these to be a bit more suitable for what you're doing. So here's a logo template based on the idea of a craft-made beer, and you could of course swap this type out to be whatever it is you want to say. So here's a nice and simplistic layout for a steakhouse. I really like the font choice in combination with this vintagey looking illustration on the top here. I really like how the distress in the font works so nicely with the distress and the steak icon up the top here. So that's it for this pack. There are 6 different logo templates to choose from and use. And of course you can also use these hand-drawn logo elements on their own as you see fit, or the starbursts right here, or below that we have the 2 vector textures that are also quite nice and should be very flexible because they are vector. So if you liked what you saw so far, be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you might find useful, check out the description of this video where you'll find a link to download it. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite. And if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday till you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thank you for watching.